We'll be singing number 94. 94. First verse on. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and around me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest in the vault of rocks and trees, of skies and seas. His hands of wonders wrought.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us come here today to learn more about your word. Let us be mindful of you and be mindful of our teachers and our classrooms. And please be with us as we learn more about your word. Be with us throughout the day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
I was going to use him. He's a good sport. He's almost as old as Abraham was. So. Try to not there. I wish I had. This thing keeps falling down. It keeps falling. We need a screw, pair of pliers. Yeah. Well. See?
You want 2 weeks in one.
See? We've had this discussion. For with God nothing is impossible. Luke 1:37. For we walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7. These are two verses that have a profound impact on the individual that we're going to discuss today from the Old Testament. When I started doing this lesson, I got carried away because there's so much information on this individual and what he does in the Bible and what he does for history of Christianity. The individual I'm talking about is Abram. And we're going to try and cover roughly 14 chapters in about 40 minutes. There's a lot. And I don't know if I'm going to get to all of it or not. I did beg and plead for 2 weeks and didn't get it. So, what do you think about when you think about Abram? What do you think? What comes to your mind when you think about him?
Faith.
Faith. What else?
Obedience.
Obedience. Hope. This guy's having kids at 99. He's my buddy. That's what I think of. It's hard to believe he can do that, you know. With God, anything is possible. We first see Abram appear in the Bible around the 11th chapter of Genesis. So we're early in biblical history when we talk about Abram. It goes. It explains his mother and father, who they are. His brother who his brother is, and it's important who his brother is because of his brother's son, or Abram's nephew, who is Lot. Very important. Abram is like tentacles. There's so many different individuals that we are going to talk about that I have to brush over, because you could just start talking about any number of these individuals. That could be his wife, Hagar, Lot, Ishmael, Pharaoh. There is just a string of individuals that are associated with him through these next, 14 chapters. I'm not going to take away Robert's great lesson he's going to give next week on Abram's wife. So I'm going to just skim over it a little bit. Abram did take a wife, and I looked at how you pronounce her name in different languages, and it came down between Sarai and Sarai. So Sarai was the one that gave the most pronunciation. So her name is Sarai, and this is before the covenant. So we have Abram and Sarai, and then when we get to the covenant, we'll find out how their names change. Then we go into 12. I am intrigued by things that most people aren't intrigued with. I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd most of all. I'm a rock hound. I love to collect rocks. So things stick out to me a little differently than most people. And they're like, you don't need to know that. Well, to me, it's important. And it's important sometimes because you never know how you'll have to give an explanation to someone who asks about it. And one of those is in chapter 12 where it says, now the Lord hath said unto Abram. He said something. Does that mean God came down and talked to him? That's the first time that you'll see many different ways that God communicates with Abram in Genesis. It's different. There's no one has ever seen God at any time. But it's interesting how God relays his information to Abram in Genesis. So he tells him that he's going to make him a great nation. And that's Genesis 12:2 and 12:3. I will bless Abram and curse those who curse him. So he's going to be a great nation, and God's going to make sure that he's blessed. And the other interesting thing that I noticed about Abram is God sends him everywhere. He is on the move. I know now why he lives to be 175 years old, because he walks a lot. He's on the move. And God tells him where to go, okay? He tells him where to go, gives him all this land of Canaan, and he tells him where to go, and he goes. That's sort of the first sign of faith. Not trust, it's different, but faith. So he's going to have faith in the Lord that wherever he sends him, that's where he's going to go. So while he departed, and he started walking with all his family and everything that he owned. And by the way, he's taken Lot with him, so we have to mention Lot a little bit here. He's taken his nephew with him. It's important later on. And in Genesis 12:13, this is another one of these points that I want to bring up. In Genesis 12:13, it says, Abram stated to his wife, you are fair, and the Egyptians will kill me, meaning him, Abram, for I am your wife. Or, for you are my wife. This was around, Abram was around 75 years old, and Sarai was around 65 years old. I kind of want to take some away from the book a little bit and read from the Bible. Another one of those, the Lord said things to him. How about in verse 7 of chapter 12, the Lord appeared. The Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give you this land, and there buildeth he an altar to the Lord who appeared upon him. That's another different word that I find intriguing. So, we know Sarai is a fair lady. She's very pretty, pleasing to the eye. And there was this, while they're on the move and God told them where to go, there's this big famine. There's a famine. And they move into Egypt. And at that point, Abram says, I pray thee, thou art my sister, it may make me well, and me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. So in other words, Abram wants to relinquish his wife to the Pharaoh. Because if they find out that they are married, Abram's believed that he will be put to death. So even the princess of Pharaoh is noted in here that she is acceptable to that, and that she is a very fair lady. So this is another point that I like to talk about, and I hope someday that I'll be able to give a sermon on this. I just am not 100% sure a lot of what I'm going to say is biblically correct. Isn't that awesome? You should say that, because you make sure that before you say something, it's biblically correct. That is called God's permissive will and God's perfect will. Does God have a perfect will? Does he have a permissive will? And I've often thought about that. How many times in my life did I do things that could have been a disaster? What if Sarai got pregnant by Pharaoh? What did Abram do? He gave his wife to Pharaoh. What if that would have happened? What would have happened? I don't know. Is this God's perfect will or God's permissive will? I don't know. But at a later date, we'll talk about that. I'm still compounding that sermon, compiling it to see whether or not I have everything biblically correct on that. So anyway, so she's in the house of Pharaoh, and the Lord starts to issue plagues on Pharaoh. Verse 17 of chapter 12. And Pharaoh's all upset with Abram. He's like, why did you tell me she's your sister? Why'd you tell me that? You know, you brought these curses on me. And so Pharaoh decides, okay, I'm going to send you away and your wife and Lot with him into the south. So that's the first little glitch in this. And we'll find out later on, which for some reason, I skip over things and don't really catch them. Sarai actually, according to what he says later on, is his half-sister. Is his half-sister. I didn't realize that till later on, and I brushed over that and didn't catch that. But technically speaking, it is his half-sister. Then we go into chapter 13, and I don't want to get too much into this. Again, it's because it deals with Lot, and Lot plays an important role. Would you say that Lot had a role? We understand what he did, especially with Sodom and Gomorrah. But do you think he had an impact on the covenant between God and Abram? I would say he does. I would say he does. That's why he's with Abram. And we'll see a little bit more on when we get to Sodom and Gomorrah exactly what goes on there. But there's a dispute. Lot and Abram get into a little dispute. And this is a land dispute. It's over the boundaries of the herds. And so Abram says, look, I don't want to strife with you. I don't want to beef with you. I don't, Lot. You go here, I'll go here, and that'll pretty well take the end of this. So Abram dwells in the land of Canaan. But what Lot does is Lot pitches his tent towards Sodom. And we know that Sodom was wicked and sinners before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Abram, after Lot was separated from him, lift up thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward, eastward and westward. For all the land which you seest, to thee I will give. He's making this covenant. So that if any man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. That's a lot of people. That is a ton of people. So I kind of look at the two different covenants. And we'll get to this land one, because he's giving him this land. He's telling him where he's going to go. Chapter 14 is about the War of the Nine Kings. Not going to get too much into this, other than the fact that because of where Lot was, it was his nephew. Because of where he was, the mere fact that the 4 of the 9 kings, 4 were battling against 5. 4 of them took all all the supplies, I guess the herds and everything. Well, they also took Lot. And this is where Abram comes in and says, well, that's my nephew, I guess. I need to go get him. And that's what he does. He takes 318, trained individuals. Some of his more, I don't necessarily would call them his army, but they were individuals that he could use in time of war. And of course we know that Lot, or Abram goes and gets Lot from them. So that deals with chapter 14, and I don't want to deal too much with Lot because that is at another time. Melchizedek, I probably really needed to go there a little bit. Because he's blessed, this king blesses, he is the king of righteousness. He blesses Abram. I do find out something else that's a little interesting too. In 14, it's the first time that I see, and Pat, you can tell me, it's the first time that I've ever seen the word Hebrew used in the Bible to that point. Matter of fact, in verse 13 it says, and there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew. From what I researched a little bit, the word Hebrew has 2 meanings when it's used in the Bible. One, it's the religious order. And number 2, it's a language. So these are the 2 that I found when I did a little bit of research on that. But I found it interesting that it uses the word, and that's the first time it's used in there.
You're looking at the LXX. It says there that he's called a Hebrew because over that land of Hebrew. So we first called Hebrew.
It's interesting how God, now we know that God appeared and God spoke. Now the Lord came into Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." And again, he's reassuring him along the way. And he brought him forward, verse 5, and said, "Look now toward heaven and tell the stars if thou wilt be able to number them." And he said unto him, so shall thy seed be. And he believed. Abram believed. That's very important. He believed. He's already left the land, God's told him, and now God's reassuring him. He's not only going to be the father of a great nation, he's going to have all this offspring that is the dust of the earth, the number of stars that you could count in the sky. And I would, of course, say at that time you could see a lot of, at nighttime, a lot of stars. Not like here when you look up and you can barely see the North Star because it's so light. All right, so I guess they had this conversation in the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram. This is the covenant of the land because he tells him and tells him in the next couple chapters or the next couple verses where he is going. In 16 is where it gets interesting because God is already telling Abram, look, you're going to be the father of many nations, more than you can ever count. It's going to be incredible. Well, now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. So I guess they're having, like anything, I talk to my wife, and I'm sure everybody married here is talking to each other. So I would assume, Jeff, help me out. I would assume that Abram and Sarai is talking about this. He's talking to his wife, saying, look, this is what God's telling me. We need to do this. Well, obviously, I would think that would be the case. Why? Because Sarai comes up with this idea, and behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go unto the handmaid, or my maid. It may be I may obtain children by her. And Abram weakened to the voice of Sarai. He weakened to the voice. So I'm sure he's probably talking to her, and she comes up with this great idea. Says, look, why don't you have kids with my handmaid? I don't know if, I didn't see the words concubine, but it's her handmaid. That he goes, okay. So maybe I'm supposed to have kids this way. God's perfect will, God's permissive will. You see how I said that earlier, and now I'm saying it again? I don't know. I don't know if that was God's perfect will. God knows everything. So I'm assuming that God also knew that he's going to have a child. And later on, you'll know who that child is. We know who the child is. And there was a great nation that came out of this child as well. So she conceived, and of course, we know who that child is that she had, which is Ishmael. And I guess there's so many lessons to learn out of this. There's a lot of lessons. Did Abram really think that having a child with another woman, even though his wife approved of it then, was really going to go over very well after the child's born? And as we know, it does not. Sarah is not happy. She's not happy about it. You know? So much that, and again, these are more, Hagar is the mistress. I don't want to get too much into it, other than, Sarah leaves. Hagar leaves. Sarah dealt with her harshly, and she fled. And an angel of the Lord came, said, "Look, this is what's going to happen." Yes.
Sarah got very emotional. So it was her idea for him to do that. And I guess we see that thing today when you give the idea of the plan and do the plan, and then the emotion came into play.
I heard, this is a very secular way of putting this, but a man, and it's a good way to put this, actually a preacher said this, a man caught his wife cheating with another man. And what he was actually trying to do was that they could all live under the same roof after it had happened. But what really happens is the betrayed husband gets a gun. It's a good way to look at it. Even what you thought at the idea at the time was good for her, she found out later it was not, because Sarah got jealous about it. She got jealous and upset, and she treated Hagar very badly. Agreed?
But having the love for Abraham, that she decided to do that, she wanted to have kids. We couldn't mess up the line of genealogy that was being portrayed there. So we know that God, everything was possible and nothing was impossible, so that was still going to be carried out. But the length of time that Hagar stayed there, 10 years, that's a very long time to be in the same house. But today it's totally different than the man cheating on his wife and moving her in. We know this is more of a providence that's happened, a biblical thing that is going on.
It is, but it's still, you still have feelings. Human feelings are still, yeah. And of course, this is when Abram was 86 years old. Then when chapter 17, when Abram was 99 years old, he appeared. The Lord appeared. I am the Almighty God, walk with me and be thou perfect. I will make my covenant between me and thee and will multiply thee exceedingly. The second covenant. First was the land. This one is a covenant of your lineage. He is making this covenant. What is a covenant? It's an agreement. Can it be broken? And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. This is where God changes his name from Abram to Abraham. I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And he uses the covenant again in verse 9 and 10. And he tells him that every man-child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of covenant between me and you. Interesting. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, and every male child in your generations, he that is born in your house, or bought with a stranger, or money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed, including Abraham, had to be circumcised. Why 8 days? How many medical people do we have? Vitamin K, you guys are smart. Vitamin K, I knew that. But I didn't know everybody knew that. And I knew now when babies are born, they put vitamin K into their heel a shot because they circumcised him immediately. So that's pretty cool. Ain't God awesome how he does things in a certain order? It's awesome. Okay, so 17, we're trying to get there. We talked about in chapter 17 with Hagar. Then in verse 18, I'm sorry, chapter 18. Well, let me go back to 17, 16. After he changed Abram's name to Abraham, he also changed Sarai's name. 17, 16, God will bless Sarah, and she shall be the mother of nations. So her name is now changed. Abram laughed because he was 99 and Sarah was 90. God told Abraham that he will bear a son named Isaac. God also told Abraham that Ishmael will be blessed and will make him fruitful and multiply him exceedingly. But that covenant will be between he and Isaac, not with Ishmael. Questions so far? Comments?
I'm afraid to.
Why?
You said you had 2 weeks worth of material covered.
No, I had 2 weeks until you told me I could only do 1 week, so then I cut it all down.
Oh, yeah.
I know I'm skipping over some stuff, but I haven't. I was kind of hoping I'd had the audience that Adam had.
Well, it is interesting in that exchange with the emotional response from Sarah regarding her handmaid. When Abraham was distressed because she said, kick her out, God said, listen to the voice of your wife. It's interesting because you compare and contrast that with Eve and Adam. Because you listen to the voice of your wife, that's why you have all these problems. But there are other times when you should listen to the voice of your wife. But it does say or suggest that in their marriage, they consulted with one another and they had these conversations.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And I share things with my wife. My wife and I talk, so why wouldn't they? You know, I'm kind of go forward a little bit more because I am going to run out of time.
I told you. You asked for it.
I hate it when you're right. All right, so in chapter 20, Amalek and Abraham. What's going on here? Did Abraham not learn anything the first time with Pharaoh? I guess he'd just assume he's going to get killed again. But Amalek had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she is my sister, and she herself said, he is my brother. She went along with it. And yet, indeed, she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. Hence, I told you earlier, this is where she's technically a half-sister to her husband. Is it okay to lie?
It never produces any good.
You know, there's so many lessons out of this.
Unless she asks you, how does this look on me?
And I'm running out of time. There's so many lessons you can learn from these things. And the lesson is, if you're looking at sin, think about all the things that could come out of that sin, not just with the initial sin, but everything else that could come. Here we go again. God's already promised Abraham, you're going to be the father and his wife, the mother. You can mess it up. Chapter 21, the Lord visited Sarah, and he said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he spoken. So she conceives and bears Abraham a son in his old age. That's interesting too. At the set time of God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of the son that was born unto him, who Sarah bare to him, Isaac. He's 99 years old. I guess they consider that old. But consider he almost lived double his life again. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born unto him. And the doting mother and father. Then I don't want to skip over too much. I just want to go to chapter 22. It came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, Isaac, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offered him there for a burnt offering unto one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. The doting father. Have you ever had the discussion that Moriah may be the same place where Christ was crucified? Have you? Do you? I didn't know that until I researched it a little bit. It would be interesting if it was, because it actually means that I had it wrote down somewhere what that actual meaning of that land means. It's like the land of God is interpreted to be land of God. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled an ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son and clave the wood for the burnt offering, rose up and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. So Abraham's there. He's got Isaac with him. He's got the fire. He's got all the wood he needs. He's got the knife. Okay? So he leaves the 2 with him and they go. Him and his son go. Isaac said unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold the wood and the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went, both of them. They came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar of the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, took the knife to slay Isaac, and at that moment an angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld the son, thine only son, from me. And in the thicket over to the side, there was a ram. His horns were caught, and they used that ram as the burnt sacrifice. This is of all the things you could talk about and all the different ways you can go, and we never got to the three men where Abraham pitched his tent and he was sitting there at the beginning, and the three men, we didn't even talk about that. And I really wanted to talk about that some more, but you can only talk about so much with what you're given. But this is what Abraham is known for, if anything. In every circle of every group of people who study the Bible will tell you Abraham is known for his faith. He's known for his faith. He went where God told him to go, and he went a lot of different places, and he had a child, and God told him to kill that child as a birth offering, and right before he did, God said no. Could you do that? How many people have children here that could do that? That's tough. Human feelings, again. That's tough. Sarah was 127 years old when she died. Abraham did go on to marry again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. He had 6 sons. He remarried, had 6 sons, and then he died at 175 years old. The end. That's a lot. I didn't get to the 3. I got 2 minutes. Let's discuss the 3, which I found very interesting. Chapter 18. So he sits down, he pitches a tent, and Abraham sits down. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him, and when he saw them, he ran to meet them at the front door and bowed himself towards the ground and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Gives them some water, kills a calf, makes some butter. Who are those 3 men? Who are those 3 men? All 3? One of them was the Lord. I can only assume the other 2 were angels, because I know 2 angels went into Sodom and Gomorrah. If they could just find 1/10 of a person, but they had the faith. But isn't that interesting? Before Abraham was, I am. Ego eimi. I am. Greek. Very interesting stuff. You could go so much into this. There's so much you could go into, so many tentacles you could go into, you can see how many individuals are listed in here that went through Abram's life and the way it came out. This really, I could do this study, I could do a week-long study on this alone and really put in all the things that you want to, the life lessons that you could learn from Abraham and Sarah.
Part of what we're doing in this Sunday morning series, we're letting different speakers take the opportunity to teach, because we know it benefits the person who's preparing the lesson. One of the ways it benefits you, Brother Weaver, is that it allows you to understand the discipline of teaching. You have to go through all the material and decide, this is all I can present in 1 week. And you did a good job of it, I think.
Well, and that's true.
It's hard.
That's true, and it's hard. But you really want to give as much information. There's things that I didn't say in here that I wish I would have said, but I just couldn't get to all of them.
Welcome to
Yeah.
You'll never see it all. It's too massive. You'll never see it.
No.
It is.
Get it all set.
It is a lot. Questions, comments?
Good class.
Good class, I think we should give you a little more time.
Good morning, Brother Gray. Good morning, Sister Gray. I just got through talking about, at 99 years old, having a child. What do you think about that? You know I was going to pick on you this morning. Okay.